Welcome to Biography Central. You are listening to Life of Sri Ramakrishna, a complete biography. Chapter 22, Pilgrimage. Mathur and his wife arranged for a pilgrimage to northern India and wanted Sri Ramakrishna to accompany them. At their earnest request, the master consented to be one of the party, which numbered about 125, including Hriday. 1 second class and 3 third-class cars were reserved, with an arrangement to detach them at any station between Howrah and Mughal Sarai. The party started on January 27, 1868. They halted for a few days at Deoghar to visit the shrine of Adyanath. Here an interesting thing happened. One day, while passing through a neighboring village, Sri Ramakrishna was greatly distressed to see the wretched condition of its people. Moved with sympathy for them, he said to Mathur, "You are the steward of the mother. Feed these poor people and give everyone a piece of cloth." Mathur at first hesitated, saying, "This pilgrimage will cost a lot of money, and these people are very numerous. We may be short of funds on the journey if we try to feed and clothe them. So what do you say to this, Father?" But Sri Ramakrishna was inexorable. He shed tears at the sight of such abject misery and said in anguish, "Fie upon you! I'm not going to Benares. I prefer to remain with these helpless people." Like a petulant child, he left Mathur's company and sat with the poor villagers. At the sight of his compassion, Mathur was much moved and ordered bales of cloth from Calcutta to distribute among them, and he fed them as well. Sri Ramakrishna then cheerfully started for Benares. At a wayside station near Mughal Sarai, Sri Ramakrishna and Hriday alighted from the train, and the train went off without them. Mathur was extremely anxious and from the next station wired to the station master to send them by the following train. He arranged for a conveyance for Sri Ramakrishna and Hriday, and with a depressed heart proceeded towards Benares. Fortunately, a special train conveying Babu Rajendra Lal Banerjee of Calcutta, a distinguished railway official, came along just then. He saw the sad plight of the master and Hriday, took them into his carriage, and dropped them off at Mughal Sarai. Sri Ramakrishna arrived within sight of Benares, originally called as Varanasi or Kashi. The name Benares was the name given by British for easier pronunciation. Benares is the holiest city of India, a place immortalized in its scriptures as the eternal city of Shiva. As he approached Benares by boat across the Ganges, he had a strange vision. The holy city actually appeared to him, as the sacred books declare, to be made of gold. It seemed as if the precious thoughts of countless monks and devotees had accumulated there, making the place an abode of the gods. The real Benares was spiritual, while the external, material one was but its shadow. He was deeply impressed by this glorious vision, and for the first few days was scrupulous about maintaining the purity of the place. Going outside its spiritual boundary, the stream Asi, for acts likely to defile its sanctity. Mathur engaged a couple of houses near the Kedarghat. He lived at Benares in royal style. Whenever he went out, he was surrounded by a number of liveried men who carried his silver umbrella and other paraphernalia. Sri Ramakrishna could not walk, so he was carried in a palanquin. One day, Mathur with Sri Ramakrishna visited a zemindar at Benares. Naturally, his parlor was filled with men who discussed worldly matters. Sri Ramakrishna was pained at this and complained to the Divine Mother, "Where hast thou brought me, Mother? I was far better at Dakshineshwar. There I used to have spiritual conversations only, but here people indulge in all sorts of worldly talk." The very first act of Mathur at Benares was to give doles of food to scholars. He also invited them and their families to his home, fed them, and gave to each a piece of cloth and a rupee in cash. Sri Ramakrishna, with Hriday as attendant, used to visit the shrine of Vishwanath, the presiding deity of the place, almost daily. He would fall into a trance even on the way, as well as in the presence of the deity. It is said that his samadhi state was deepest at the temple of Kedarnath. He also went to visit the noted monks of Benares. With Mathur, he visited a monastery of the Nanak Panthis and was pleased with their great devotion. Another day, he paid a visit to the famous Trelanga Swami, who was then under a vow of silence. The Swami beckoned him to take a seat and held out his snuff box to him as a mark of welcome. Referring to this visit, the master afterwards said, "I found in him the living manifestation of Vishwanath." Benares was sanctified by his presence. He was in a state of the highest consciousness, with no idea of the body. He lay cheerfully on the scorching sand. I asked him by a sign if God was one or many. He replied by gestures that God is one when seen in a state of samadhi, but when looked at through the prism of relative consciousness, he is many. Pointing to him, I said to Hriday, "This is the state of a real Paramahansa." Trailanga Swami was then constructing a bathing ghat near the Mani Karnika. At the instance of Sri Ramakrishna, Hriday dug a few spadefuls of earth for the work, which pleased the Swami greatly. The master invited him one day to the home of Mathur and entertained him with great respect. Sri Ramakrishna had a wonderful vision at Benares, which he often related to his disciples. Mathur used to take him by boat to visit the shrines on the Ganges. On this particular day, the boat was gliding past the Mani Karnika, where amid columns of smoke, many dead bodies were being cremated. As soon as the master came upon the scene, he became wild with joy, and hastening to the edge of the boat, was lost in samadhi. The priest who was acting as a guide and the boatman stepped forward to prevent him from falling into the river. But they had not to do anything. He stood there perfectly motionless, a divine smile lighting up his countenance. Mathur and Hriday standing by in readiness to help if he should lose his balance. Some minutes passed in this way, and the master began to come back to normal consciousness. Then they performed the religious rites for which they had come and returned home. Sri Ramakrishna then told of his vision to all. "I saw a tall figure with a white body and tawny matted locks staidly approach each funeral pyre and tenderly lifting up the jiva, being, breathe into its ears the supreme mantra. The gracious mother of the universe, seated on the other side of the pyre, was removing one after another all the coverings of bondage of every jiva, and unlocking the gate of nirvana, was speeding the fortunate soul to the absolute. Thus, the realization of Advaita, which people attain after ages of concentration and austerity, was brought within the easy reach of those who died at Benares, through the infinite mercy of Shiva." Everyone was astonished to hear this recital, and the learned scholars who accompanied Mathur remarked, "We learn from the Kashi Khanda that Shiva confers nirvana on those who die at Benares, but it is not explicitly stated how. Your vision makes it quite clear. It is strange that your realizations outdo even the scriptural records." After about a week's stay at Benares, the party moved on to Prayagraj, where all bathe in the sacred confluence of the Ganges, that is, River Ganga, and the Jamuna, that is, River Yamuna, and invisible River Sarasvati. Mathur and others, observing the tradition of the place, shaved their heads, but Sri Ramakrishna refrained from doing so, saying that it was not necessary for him. After 3 days, the party returned to Benares. At the end of a fortnight, Mathur and his party went to Vrindavan. A house near the Nidhovan was taken. As in Benares, he lived in princely style. Sri Ramakrishna was in high spirits in this sacred place, rich in the countless sweet memories of Sri Krishna. He visited the places of interest with characteristic emotions. The following is his description of some of his experiences. At the sight of Banku Vihari, I was overwhelmed with emotions and ran to embrace him. I was not so impressed by Govindaji. The very sight of the Kaliya Daemon Ghat used to throw me into ecstasy, and Hriday used to bathe me like a child. I would take a stroll in the evening on the sandy beach of the Jamuna, where there were small thatched huts among the jujube trees. One evening, I saw herds of cows returning from their pasture. Followed by cowherd boys, they waded the Jamuna. The scene at once suggested Sri Krishna to me, and overwhelmed with emotion, I ran, crying wildly, "Where is Krishna? Oh, where is Krishna?" I had a desire to visit Shamkund and Radhakund. They sent me in a palanquin. It was a long distance, so they provided refreshments for the way. I got down to visit the Govardhan Hill. The very sight of it overwhelmed me, and I ran to the top, where I stood lost to outward consciousness. The inhabitants of the place brought me to normal. On the way to Shamkund and Radhakund, I saw the old meadows and trees and plants, and birds and deer, rich with associations, and could not contain myself. Tears rolled from my eyes and wet my cloth. I thought, "O Krishna, everything hallowed with thy association is there. Only I can't see thee." I was in the palanquin, but had not the power to utter a syllable and could not ask the bearers to stop. Hridaya was following and had warned them to be very careful. At Shamkund and Radhakund, I found that the sadhus had made something like thatched huts, in which they were practicing devotional exercises with their back to the door lest their eyes see people outside. At Vrindavan, Sri Ramakrishna visited Ganga Mata, a Vaishnava woman devotee, noted for her great spiritual realizations. She was looked upon as an intimate attendant of Sri Radha, reincarnated to teach people the secret of divine love. About 60 years old, she had spent the greater part of her life in the village of Barshana, the birthplace of Radhika. At the very first sight, she understood the greatness of Sri Ramakrishna and considered herself blessed to have met him. Sri Ramakrishna was charmed with her piety and devotion. We reproduce here the master's own description of her and of his association with her. Ganga used to take great care of me. She was very old and lived all alone in a hut near Nidhoven. Seeing my condition and loss of consciousness in samadhi, she often said, "This is verily Radha reincarnated in flesh and blood." She used to address me as Dalali. When I was in her company, I forgot all about food and drink or returning to my quarters. On some days, Hridaya would bring food to her, but didn't feed me. Gangamai, too, used to prepare various things for me. She had frequent trances, which attracted crowds. I had no desire to leave her, so it was settled that I should remain. I was to take boiled rice. Gangamai was to have her bed at one end of the room and I at the other. It was arranged in every detail. Then Hridaya said, "You are so subject to stomach complaints. Who will look after you?" "Why," said Gangamai, "I will look after him. I will serve him." Well, here was Hridaya pulling me by one hand and Gangamai by the other. At this moment, I was reminded of my mother, who was living alone in the concert room of the Kali temple at Dakshineshwar. I thought, who will look after her if I remain in Vrindavan? This decided me. I said, "No, I must go." He expressed to Hridaya his high opinion of this remarkable devotee. At Vrindavan, Sri Ramakrishna adopted the Vaishnava dress, which he wore for a fortnight. He visited Mathura also, where he said, at the very side of the Dhruva Ghat, he had a vision of Vasudeva crossing the Jamuna with his babe Krishna in his arms. The master returned with Mathur's party to Benares, after staying at Vrindavan for about a fortnight. At Benares, he met the Bhairavi Brahmani, his teacher in the practice of the Tantras. She was living at one of the ghats with another old woman, also a pious soul. Sri Ramakrishna went to see her several times and was pleased at the devotion of her companion. The master advised the Brahmani to stay at Benares till the end of her life. She passed away shortly after. At Benares, Sri Ramakrishna had a great desire to listen to the music of the veena. Fortunately, there was an expert in the Madhumpara quarter named Mahesh Chandra Sarkar. The master waived all ceremony, went to his house, and requested him to play for him. Mahesh Chandra gladly consented. The first notes had scarcely fallen on his ears when Sri Ramakrishna went into samadhi. Half regaining consciousness, he prayed to the Divine Mother, "Don't take away my consciousness, Mother. I wish to enjoy the veena." After that, he retained consciousness and enjoyed the music, to which he sometimes joined voice. 3 hours were spent in this way, when after light refreshments he returned home. After that, Mahesh came to Mathur's every day to see the master. Mathur stayed at Benares till May, to witness a special decoration of Vishwanath. On his return journey, he had a mind to visit Gaya. But Sri Ramakrishna declined to go there, and he had to give up the project. The master thought that if he once visited that sacred place, his mind would leave the physical plane forever. He knew of his father's vision at Gaya before his birth, and was convinced that his mind would become permanently absorbed in God there. He considered himself an instrument in the hand of the mother, and bowed to her decree that his body should remain in the world to carry out her divine purpose. Accordingly, the party returned to Calcutta directly. From Vrindavan, the master had brought a handful of sacred dust, part of which he sprinkled in the Panchavati. The rest of it he buried in the little cottage where he had practiced sadhana, and said, "Now this place is as sacred as Vrindavan." Shortly after, at his request, Mathur fed a large number of Vaishnavas and gave them money. I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.